Arc 10, Chapter 10. Faith-embedded stranger. So in the end, Captain, you're tellin' me that even when lookin' at it with your own eyes, you couldn't tell whether that Phylor Saintess is the real missin' royal, or if it's felt Sama. Hoy, stranger. But you saw afterwards that Duchess Carson's health had recovered, right? Whether she is royalty or not, it's at least clear that the power of the sacrament is real, isn't it? Hi, Subaru. Yeah. I think that's something Biko and Rem can also attest to after we went there together. What Emilia Tan and Otto saw wasn't mistaken. Moreover, her description of Phylor being a really good girl wasn't something that I could reasonably deny either. She seemed like an Emilia Tan type of girl without any malicious intentions. Hooey. Letting out a deep sigh, Subaru recalled the rumored saintess he had encountered directly earlier on this day at the church, and with an indescribable mood, he tucked away the plate in his hands on the shelf. The cupboard provided for the royal residence was filled with both wooden and ceramic tableware, and having used those for their meal, Subaru and the others were now in the midst of washing, drying, and putting everything away. Garfield would wash the dishes at the wash basin. Petra would then wipe them dry, and then Subaru would store them away where they belonged. Since the royal residence was a guest house for upper nobles who had business in the royal capital, there was fundamentally no aspect of it that left anything to be desired, and provisions to ensure the guests had no inconveniences were constantly being carried out. If necessary, there were housekeepers that could be dispatched to take care of things like cooking, cleaning, and one's daily necessities. But the majority of nobles tended to bring along their own trusted servants, so it did not seem like they had many opportunities to work. The Amelia camp had also developed a style whereby the meal preparations for the day had been tasked to Petra, and the tidying up was being assisted by Subaru and Garfield, who had lost in rock, paper, scissors. So as the three of them were coordinating to tidy up together, they had ended up plunging into the current topic. Garfield. But you see, Captain, if you're sayin' thatcha guys ain't mistaken, it even wit your own eyes, then my amazin' self's true feelin's are of wantin' to do something to help outwit the problem in Prestella. Petra. But what if that leads to it being discovered that Phylor-san is real royalty? If that happens, Emilian Isama's run in the royal selection might come to an end, you know. Garfield. That'd be a whole nother story, though. The saintness called Phylor's already gone, and risen to center stage. Just that nobody, except the big shots in the inner circles, know about her yet. Stirring around the water in the bucket to form soap suds, Garfield responded to Petra's words as he washed the dishes. His emerald green eyes narrowed as he engaged in combat against the stubborn stains clinging to the dishes, using a scrap of linen in place of a sponge. Garfield. Not that I've seen her for my amazin' self, but if she's causin' that much of an uproar wit just her looks, there ain't gonna be no keepin' her hidden even if you tried. Much less if she's plannin' to go off and heal Prestella same like she did the Duchess's body. Petra. Yeah, I think you'd get a perfect score with that understanding of yours, Garf-san. You're now able to properly read the social climate. Good boy, good boy. Garfield, don't be talkin' 'bout it like you were givin' me some sorta test. I'll say this now, but my amazin' self's Petra's senior, yeah. Even when being patted on the head by Petra, who wore an expression most fitting for a teacher, Garfield could not show any resistance with both of his hands deep in the wash bucket, so all he could do was roar like a tiger. Pleasantly watching over their interaction with a faint smile, Subaru could not help but feel that the tides of the state of the world were shifting in an undesirable direction. Subaru. At the current moment, it really feels like there's a yellow light on the progress of the royal selection. But from here on out, if it ended up shifting into a red light, would it ever turn back to a green light once more, so that Emilia could honestly continue to fulfill her role as a royal candidate? Subaru. In all honesty, Subaru feared now that the possibilities for the surviving princess were narrowed down to the two options of Felt and Phylor. The royal selection would shift into something that simply sought the answer of which one of them is the true heir. Naturally, as Emilia's one and only knight, that was not something he could accept, but even disregarding that point of view, there was something about it that just did not sit right with him. That was something that had also been raised as a topic while they were en route to the royal capital via the Reinhard sprint method. Subaru, to begin with, before Phylor ever showed up, why was there no development of felt being decided as the next monarch the moment she was suspected of being the princess? Of course, this world doubtlessly did not keep track of highly reliable evidence that would be useful for identifying individuals, such as DNA tests, fingerprint records, and dental care records. However, even the reasons why Felt was suspected of being the princess were quite the ambiguous things, such as the rare physical features of her outward appearance and how her age lined up with that of the missing princess. If that were enough to serve as proof of one's lineage in this world, then it would not have been strange in the slightest for the royal selection to have ended on that day, moments before Subaru made a fool of himself in the royal castle. Subaru, but that didn't happen. The greatest reason for that was Petra, the dragon history stone. As Subaru raised his eyebrows at having been beaten to the punch, Petra stared at him as she handed him the plate she had just finished drying upon receiving it from Garfield. Subaru nodded, exactly, and accepted both the plate and conclusion from her. Subaru, throughout history, it's been a prophetic slab that's assisted the kingdom in various times of crisis. Though, it seems like the dragon history stone was what gave the instruction to hold the royal selection. Garfield. What's the matter? When you say it like that, it kinda sounds like there's something about it that's eaten at ya, Captain. Subaru. No, when I first heard about it, I didn't think much of it, you know. It's a fantasy world, so the thought of there being those kinds of marvelous items actually raised my excitement. But but it's different now. Subaru. Yeah. After all, I've now got various inklings concerning an item that can inform about things that have yet to happen. Moreover, those are frequently bad inklings. As Subaru made a face that appeared as if he had eaten a bitter bug, Petra and Garfield exchanged glances. It had been nearly 2 years since Subaru had started life in another world. And to be frank, there was an excessive amount of things in this world that posed as future sight or the guidance of fate, but were actually just trying to put ideas into people's heads. In Valencia, Abel had regarded the stargazers with open hostility, and the witch of greed he had met in the tomb had given Beatrice a book of blank pages to dictate how she lived her life. And above all, he had even heard that the Gospels believed to be delivered into the hands of which cultists would twist their very manner of being into something sinister. How was the dragon history stone any different from those interferences that distorted fate from the sidelines? Subaru. I get why someone would get into the habit of relying on something if they were told it predicted the future. All the more so if it has a track record to back it up. But the age-old trick of a conman is to let you win a little at the start, before crookedly taking a whole lot more from you later on. In order to drag someone into a convenient decision in the future, they would give them small, inconsequential victories within their sphere of influence. So long as one was not aware of what they would be made to do for that utmost vital decision, there would be a risk that they might grow far too confident that whatever fate was telling them would be something positive for themselves. With those thoughts in mind, Subaru felt a sense of danger within the very prophecy of the dragon history stone. But Garfield and Petra. Subaru? Huh, why are you two making faces like that? When Subaru conveyed the apprehensions he harbored, Garfield and Petra stared with their eyes widened. Though young, they were both reliable confidants when it came to intuition and reasoning respectively, so it was strange for them to have the exact same reaction to a single premise. Even if one of them were to tilt their head in confusion, the other one would be able to provide a beneficial answer. That was what he had anticipated, and yet. Then, as Subaru marveled at that, the two of them began to speak in succession. Garfield. How should I be putting this? Petra. The idea of doubting the prophecies of the dragon history stone, it's so unheard of, it took me by surprise. Subaru. The idea is unheard of. Garfield. Petra. Hum. As the two of them simultaneously nodded in agreement, Subaru wondered if it was some sort of joke. But their eyes were completely earnest, with a strong hue of genuine perplexity in their expressions, causing Subaru to blink his eyes in response. Their reaction felt like they had come into contact with something truly unforeseen. As if a question in a quiz was revealed to be solved by some logic they had never even imagined. It had been a while since he had felt this level of culture shock. No, He had only just recently experienced it again through hearing about the hereditary succession of the throne. Subaru, to be honest, I think that was just a disaster of me being way too unaccustomed to a monarchy, with the king as the absolute authority. But could this be like a more deep-rooted, religious view kind of thing? Different climate and topography would lead to differing manners and customs. So while it was only natural for aspects of common sense to vary, he had actually come quite a long way without any major friction, as a result of fundamental differences in values. He had thought he had led a relatively difficult life in another world thus far, but it seemed like he had yet to see the worst of it. Once again, he grew to understand the weight behind this nation being called the Dragon Kingdom. Subaru, Petra is a sweet, beautiful girl that bloomed in a village in the sticks, and Garfield is a golden rookie who grew up in a hidden village cut off from the rest of the world. Positions that, when compared to those born and raised in the big cities, would not receive the same benefits and education as citizens of the kingdom, even for two such individuals. The fact that they had no concept of doubting the dragon history stone was proof of just how embedded faith towards the dragon was in the collective subconscious. If that was so for two of such origins, then those who firmly placed their identity within the kingdom would be even less likely to arrive at the idea of disregarding the dragon history stone. That was precisely why, under the circumstances of royal absence, this nation had the foundations necessary to carry out something like the royal selection without any hesitation. In that case, Subaru, the thing Crush-san was attempting to accomplish, was truly something incredible. Setting aside whether that ideal was correct or not, in this world so entrenched in its faith towards said dragon, Crush's advocacy to free themselves from the covenant with said dragon was an outrageous, humongous decision that Subaru was only now coming to comprehend. In fact, based on public sentiment from before it started, Crush had been the prime candidate in the royal selection by an overwhelming margin. The moment the royal selection did not end up entirely steeped in the singular color of Crush, it would have been clear just how difficult to accept her campaign policies were for the current kingdom. At the same time, Subaru could also fathom a guess as to her aim in the white whale subjugation that had occurred right after the commencement of the royal selection. Of course, regarding the white whale subjugation, Crush would have also had feelings of wanting to allow Wilhelm, a member of her own camp, to carry out his vengeance. However, the white whale was one of the three great witch beasts that had tormented people for hundreds of years. So was she not trying to make a point by bringing it down through their own efforts? To convey her own resolve and ideals, to say that even without relying on the dragon's covenant, she could firmly lead the kingdom forward. Ultimately, through Subaru's interference, the subjugation of the white whale was also assisted by the Amelia and Anastasia camps, and was known throughout the world as an achievement of a united military campaign between the three camps. Even so, Crush had not seemed to mind. After all, Wilhelm had managed to carry out his vengeance, and even while exposed to adverse winds from her surroundings, Crush had managed to take the first step towards realizing her ideal. And yet, Crush's ideal had ended up being crushed in an unexpected way. Subaru, am I an idiot? No, I am definitely an idiot. With his understanding reaching that point, Subaru finally became painfully aware of his own thoughtlessness. Without truly understanding the significance of the ideal that was on the verge of being plucked away from Crush, he had visited her and tried to provide comfort by saying he would stand by her out of shallow sympathy and compassion. Pairing that with the tale of blighted love between Crush and the fourth prince, he had heard from Ferris later at the mausoleum. Just thinking about how insensitive and superficial his words had been made him want to die in a fit of anger. But, Garfield, you know, Captain, I dunno about sayin' this sorta thing, but when you let your emotions take over and go off sayin' this and that, it's something like Garagockel's lovesickness. But, Petra, we've all been saved by Subaru's rashness and recklessness, so we'd appreciate you not speaking so negatively about it. Garifel, ain't that what my amazin' self was just 'bout to say? Petra, sorry, I just wanted to score some points with Subaru. Poking her tongue out, Petra gave a playful apology, to which Garfield heaved a crestfallen roar. Receiving their words, Subaru subconsciously bit down hard on the inside of his cheek. That was because at first he had been surprised, then he had immediately become uncertain of what face he ought to make. He had regrets about his choice of words towards Crush, but he did not want to remain grimacing in light of Petra and Garfield's consideration. As a result, with his expression a half-baked, incoherent one, "Subaru, don't pamper me like that. If I start presuming on it, I'll never stop." "Petra, is that so? In that case, I want to start pampering Subaru even more." "Right, Garfsan." Garfield. "Dunno if pamperin's the right wordin' here, but both Captain and Atabro don't really tend to look after yourselves even though you're always talkin' care of others. Every once in a while, it's fine for my amazin' self to raise you up high in the air for a bit." "Subaru, last time you did that, you sent Otto right through the ceiling. If he remembered it right, that was a disaster that had played out when Otto had gotten drunk after finishing up a mountain of work, and drawn in by the high spirits, Garfield had attempted to show his appreciation for him with all his might. Otto had no lasting injuries, and his memory of the incident had vanished with the alcohol, so it was quite the laugh tale now. "Regardless, Subaru, I thought that there were already tons of things I need to do and things I want to do, but seems like there's now one more thing I want to make sure of." With a heart full of gratitude, Subaru reached out and rested a hand on both Garfield and Petra's heads. As they leaned into the ticklish head pat, Subaru narrowed his eyes at the soap suds bubbling to the surface of the wash bucket and foaming apart. There were countless others who were wiser and more knowledgeable than him. But if, even among such people, the significance of Subaru's presence could be found within these actions and ideas, then, Subaru, first things first, I want to get to the bottom of what the Dragon History Stone really is. What sort of power it was employing, what its intent was in trying to guide them toward a particular future. He wanted to believe that, as a person from another world, casting doubt upon that was Natsuki Subaru's advantage. First, he would start with what he already knew. If he truly wished to be there for Crush and Ferris in a way they actually desired, after they had left him feeling increasingly frustrated at his own inability to do anything. Be that as it may, Subaru, if I asked Ferris, he'd probably say that this way of thinking is prideful. Unexpectedly finding herself listening in on the conversation taking place in the kitchen, she was earnestly wavering on whether or not to reach her hand out to the door. "Stranger, seems kinda like they're in the middle of a conversation that's a bit awkward to ba RGE into." Stranger. "Hick." Stranger, "Ara, looks like I took you by surprise. If so, I apologize." At the words of Maylie as she popped up from behind to peer at her, Rem shook her head with a no as she readjusted her grip on the water pitcher in her hand. She had paid a visit to the kitchen to refill the half-empty pitcher. Inside, Subaru, Petra, and Garfield, responsible for cleaning up after dinner, were washing the dishes in coordination and having a discussion regarding the royal selection. Reluctant to interrupt their conversation, Rem had vaguely decided she would just wait until they moved on to the next topic, and had been listening to the exchange from outside the kitchen. But, Maylie, don't you think that Subaru Oniason has a really difficult Natu, Ray? Why's he always trying to shoulder everything by himself? It just makes everyone woe our ride. As the topic of conversation in the kitchen veered towards Subaru's disposition, to the part of him that would always feel excessive self-reproach, Petra and Garfield immediately jumped in with corrections and observations, and it was clear that Subaru was starting to get flustered. Standing behind Rem, it seemed like Maylie had pictured the state of things inside, and touching upon it with her own way of phrasing, she widened her eyes and looked to Rem as if seeking her agreement. "Maylie, I wonder, Rem Wennison, aren't you pretty and gry?" "Rem, I am not angry, but my feelings are rather complicated. After all, I had only just told that person something similar to what Petra-chan and Garf told him now." Maylie, that sure would explain why you'd make a face like Thati." Whatever the face she was making, Maylie's manner of speech seemed as if she was walking on eggshells. Only, recalling when she had told him something similar, when Subaru seemed like he was trying to carry the responsibility even for the death of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who had been murdered in the prison tower, Rem remembered that she had hesitated to declare it purely a problem of Subaru's disposition. After all, she understood that the reason for Subaru thinking that way also dwelled within her own attitude. "Maylie, to begin with, The way Subaru only ever seems to be counting his failures isn't good. Honestly, it's so insulting. In front of Rem, as she cast her eyes down from the sentimentality and strengthened her grip on the pitcher, Meili crossed her arms and glared at the kitchen door as she spoke those words. Rem, it's insulting. Meili, I mean, am I wrong? Despite appearances, even I believe that I've been saved by Subaru after a LL. Same goes for Petra-chan and Fanged Onii-san, which is why they're in there encouraging him as they are. Yet for him to still be like that, isn't it Anno Ying? With a finger over her lips, Meili puffed out her cheeks. Seeing her pout so childishly, Rem blinked several times before bursting out into a sudden chuckle. Meili, Ara, did you laugh at me just no W? Rem, I apologize. It was a tad unexpected. From my perspective, you and Petra-chan both just seemed like quite mature children for your age, and so… Meili, you mean to say we're cheeky, I woe ender. But although mine is just parroting what I've heard, Petra-chan's is the result of actually growing up. So for both Emilia Wonneson and Rem Wonneson, if you're careless, you might just get overtaken and end up regret-eating it. Rem, I have no idea what you are talking about. Meili, really? Fufufu Ria Ellie? That instant, Meili giggled with her hand over her mouth, elatedly smiling as if she had gotten revenge for being treated as a child. Heaving a sigh at Meili's response, Rem turned her gaze back toward the kitchen door. Rem, it seems like everyone who's a part of this camp has been saved by that person. Meili, CMS like it. Maybe that's exactly why it's so hard to tell Subaru no when he's about to do something reclais SS. But I think you don't need to woe RRY about it. Rem, Meili, after a LL, I don't think there's anyone who is more shamelessly out of place here than I am. Holding her braid of hair in her fingers, Meili shrugged her shoulders. Catching the flicker of complex emotions that colored Meili's voice, Rem narrowed her own pale blue eyes. Rem, though it is a bit late now, it is bitter that I do not have my memories. Evidently, Meili carried circumstances that were by no means light. Unlike Emilia and everyone else she had interacted with in the Valatian Empire, she had only met Meili for the first time in the kingdom of Lugunica, inside the dragon carriage that Reinhard had carried over. From a rough explanation, she had heard that Meili was once somebody who was hostile to Subaru and the others, but not wanting to unnecessarily strain the relationship. Subaru's explanation had been far too vague, and ultimately, she never learned exactly what sort of friction had existed between them and Meili. Only the intricate emotions that had emerged on her youthful face appeared to be evidence of hesitation founded in those circumstances. That was why, Rem, please, do not blame yourself too much either. Meili. Holding her breath at Rem's words, Meili stared at her intently. As she received that gaze head-on without averting her eyes, Meili parted her thin lips. Meili, is it fine for you to say such a thigh ng? Even though I once tried to kill Rem-san. Rem, that is quite the shock, but it is not something I remember, so. Meili, well, guess I'm Lu CKY for me to be lucky. I wonder if that's fine. Rather than whispering, Meili muttered those words with a voice that seemed like it would vanish. Still toying with her braid, her gaze fell from Rem down to the floor. Meili, to be honest, sometimes I think it's too good to be true, the things I've done being overlooked, being forgiven by the kingdom just because of my divine protection. Even now, I can't help but wonder if I'm not due for some terrible retribution before Lo NG. Rem. Retribution. Meili. Just like how you're praised when you do something good, you're scolded when you do something bad, right GHT? I've ended up escaping from that all this time, you know W. Perhaps feeling guilty for having been pardoned, Meili's words were pessimistic and pitiful. Her deeds that had caused her to think in such a way, Rem knew not. Was her declaration that she had once tried to kill Rem to be taken as serious, or as a joke? Perhaps if Rem knew all the details, her thoughts might change. But right now, she did not know anything. And since she did not know, she would never get another opportunity to say the things that she could only say now. So did she believe. Rem, I do not mean to make it a competition, but I carry a similar anguish. Meili, Rem Wonneson has something similar to M.E. Rem, yes. After all, I do not intend to be a person so naive as to presume it is only natural when someone does a lot for me. What she thought back on were her own actions when she had awakened in a state bereft of memories. In an environment with nobody she could count on, she had been terribly cold to him, to Subaru, and repeatedly rejected his hand. No matter how dire Rem's circumstances had been at the time, there was a limit to how much she could justify her behavior. After all, the gifts bestowed by Subaru were by no means unlimited. Rem, I have no choice but to pay the compensation for that pridefulness within myself. Until that debt is settled, I believe I do not even have the right to face him. Meili, you're really hard on yourself, aren't you? Rem, I wonder, am I really? If I consider it as a recompense for being harsh to another, to a person who cherished me, I believe it is only natural. But that is just how it is for myself, so, Meili. Taking a step to close the distance on Meili as she spoke, Rem, after a moment's hesitation, plopped her hand on the head of the girl looking up at her curiously. Then, Rem, I don't believe it is healthy for a child like you to live in such fear of some looming retribution, so I will certainly fight against it for you. Meili. Ah! As Rem falteringly selected her words, Meili expelled a soft sigh. Then, with her eyes downcast and Rem's hand on her head, Meili. Even without your memories, Rem Wonison, I think you're every bit a member of this Ka MP. Rem, that's, in what sense are you saying that? Rem knit her brows at Meili's downturned head. It happened then. Rem, Kaya? Suddenly, a strange sensation brushed against her hand placed upon Meili's head, and she reflexively let out a scream. Taking a look, a small creature had suddenly appeared on the girl's head, making its way through her dark blue hair. At the same time as she recognized it as a scorpion of a deep crimson luster, her arms promptly jerked back into a fold water pitcher, still in hand the remaining half pitcher's worth of water, drenched Meili from the head down. Rem and Meili. Ah! Witnessing that disaster, both Rem, the aggressor, and Meili, the victim, stood frozen in shock. Atop Meili's sodden hair, the little scorpion that had also been caught in the downpour was clacking its pincers in protest. Even though it was the one who had brought about the fright, the scorpion itself had the audacity to still be upset about the whole affair. Furthermore, before Rem could even finish processing that shock, the door to the kitchen vigorously swung open. Stranger. Just now didn't I hear Rem scream? Rem, what poor timing. Stranger, huh? That's the reaction I get for worrying about you. Also, what sort of situation is this? Having heard her scream, Subaru had come rushing out only to be aghast upon setting foot at the scene. At Subaru's usual liveliness, Rem momentarily hesitated on where to start explaining from. But faster than she could do so, a voice of laughter puffed out an aha. It was Meili. Having been drenched in water, she giggled, soaking together with the scorpion perched on her head, Meili. How funny. There's not even the time to be feeling due WN. Subaru, what's got you so refreshed? Oi, Petra, towel, fetch a towel. Petra, Meili-chan is dripping wet. We've got to get you into some dry clothes right away. Petra came pitter-pattering over with a towel in hand and wiped Meili's head dry along with the scorpion. As Meili stood there allowing that to be done to her, Rem bowed her head to her, still with the empty pitcher in hand. Even though Rem had meant to offer Meili a comforting hand, the actual result had been a complete washout. However, as Rem reflected on that, Meili waved her hand saying, Don't worry about it, Meili. Instead, I'll take what you told me earlier to he RT. Rem. Catching a glimpse of Meili's eyes through a gap in the towel, Rem slightly widened her own in surprise. Even during that brief interaction, Petra had gone around behind Meili and nudging her shoulders, Petra. All right, let's go get you changed. Subaru, Garfsan, there's still tidying up left to do, but... Subaru. Don't worry, we can handle the rest. Make sure Meili doesn't catch a cold. Meili, don't treat me like a Kai LD. With that sulky mutter, Meili was led away by Petra. Right until she vanished around the corner, Meili had kept on waving her hand back at Rem. After seeing those charming girls off, Subaru turned to Rem with an Subaru. Ah, is that Nisama's water? Then let's just get that refilled for you first thing. Rem. No, it is my fault that Petra-chan had to leave, so I will help. Subaru. Oh. In that case, we'll do it together. Evading the hand that reached for the pitcher, Rem offered her assistance instead. Upon doing so, Subaru looked a little surprised before immediately accepting, and as Rem gave him a bit of a flat stare, Rem, when it comes to this sort of proposal, you agree to it right away. Subaru, what's that supposed to mean? Rem, it is nothing. Garf, I will be assisting as well, so please move back a bit. Garfield, that'd be a huge help, but why's my amazin' self the only one you call in such a rough way? Rem, because that's what Ni-sama called you, and for some reason it feels right. With his hands in the bucket at the wash basin, Garfield furrowed his nose. Sensing Subaru smile wryly at that, Rem reflexively was about to say something, but she let it go. Had she not reflected on herself just now with Meili? Subaru, what's the matter, Rem? You've got this adorable look on your face. Did something happen? Rem, Subaru, sorry, I got carried away. All right, look. Let's get this all tidied up and then bring that water to Ni-sama. Subaru tried to cover up his verbal gaffe with vigor, and making a gesture of rolling up his sleeves, he ran to Garfield's side like the wind. Following along with a sigh, Rem cautioned herself as strongly as she could. Until she had settled the debts of her past actions, she would never gain the right to face this frustration. Rem, the road ahead still has many difficulties in store. Katia-san, Priscilla-san. When the day finally came that she possessed that right, just what sort of face would she show to him? Having yet to find an answer for that, Rem whispered to those she held in deepest affection and reverence within her own heart, before joining the coordinated dishwashing, seamlessly filling the gap that Petra had left behind. Questions rising anew, matters being posed anew. He had just decided to progress the situation, yet things did not go quite as expected. From time to time, it would not be uncommon for one's pace on their journey toward achieving a goal to be disrupted by a delay due to one's environment or some unexpected turmoil. In this case, it was the latter that had dampened Natsuki Subaru's departure. Stranger, phew! With a soft sigh, placing their hand over their wide-open mouth, they concealed that yawn. Although, aside from it being obvious that they had yawned, he could even see the teardrops that slowly welled up at the corners of their eyes. He had often pondered whether it would be better manners to just openly yawn, or to stifle a yawn to the point of tears. If yawning in itself was considered a breach of etiquette, then what more could be said? Stranger, your tea! As he gazed at the other party with such thoughts running through his mind, gently placed upon the table was black tea brewed by Petra, demonstrating the tea-serving techniques taught to her by Ram. As that warm aroma of fragrant tea leaves wafted through the air, the other party interrupting their own yawn with an "Oh my." Stranger, what a lovely fragrance. I feel a little ashamed, being treated so hospitably despite dropping by so suddenly, Stranger, no, it's fine. We were all just about to have tea together, so I think your taming was actually good. Stranger. Sakura Element, that's my name, Emilia-chan. Saying so with a faint smile, the woman introducing herself as Sakura Element, one of the individuals connected to the Church of the Divine Dragon, freely sipped from the cup of black tea offered to her. It had been on the periphery between early and late morning, when Sakura had paid a visit to the Emilia camp, staying at the royal residence, right around the time when their minds were just beginning to wake up. It was not something they could say aloud, but the sudden visit without a prior appointment seemed a bit like a surprise attack. Stranger, we would have liked to greet you as well, but Emilia-sama is in quite the busy situation with much she must attend to. If you could have, we would have preferred you notified us in advance. It seemed that Otto had taken quite a bit of offense at how their pace had been thrown off by her. His wording was courteous, but a hint of his objection was unmistakable in Otto's remarks, giving Subaru the feeling that the situation had set Otto's nerves on edge. Subaru, I guess letting off steam yesterday wasn't enough. You seem to think that if you talk to them in a polite tone, you are being courteous. Otto, I can hear you, you know. That is problematic, Natsuki-san. One Subaru. Scary, it's not even courtesy anymore. It's a threat. Even if Subaru was his ally, Otto was merciless in snapping back at him. But his preparedness for war was not a manner of scolding Subaru and the others, of course, but was a result of receiving an opponent he must be wary of. Coming right after yesterday, The Church of the Divine Dragon at the center of the controversy had arrived expressly to visit them. There was no way it was not associated with the royal selection. Naturally, Sakura, who had been led into the parlor, must have possessed some cunning reason, but, Sakura, Subaru-chan, I feel a bit shy when you stare at me so intently. Subaru, oh, sorry. You are a beautiful woman, Sakura-san, but was that a bit impolite of me? Sakura, Wheel, what a naughty boy, trying to hit on me while apologizing. I didn't think you would be such a smooth operator. I've heard a lot of rumors about you, Subaru-chan, you know. Subaru, rumors. About me. Toward that unexpected retaliation, Subaru gestured toward himself, and Sakura smiled with a yes. Stirring her tea like that with a teaspoon, upon taking a sip from that cup once more, she exhaled in a vaguely seductive manner. Then, tilting her head at the vague silence that had arisen, Sakura. Were you perhaps expecting something from me? Subaru. No, well, with the way things were going, wouldn't I expect to hear what rumors you've heard about me, Sakura-san? Sakura. Really? However, I'm sure Emilia-chan and the members of your camp know you much better than I do. At this point, does it really matter what kind of rumors are being spread about Yao, Subaru-chan? Beatrice, indeed, you say such nice things, I suppose. Truly, Betty and the others know Subaru the best, in fact. There is nothing to worry about, I suppose. Emilia, yeah. I'm really proud to have such a splendid night. Beatrice on his lap, and Emilia sitting to his right, gave their stamps of approval, and while he was overjoyed, the gossip concerning Subaru was swept away in an unsatisfying manner. In any case, the situation was that Subaru, Emilia, Beatrice, and Otto, along with Petra, who stood back along the wall, were all dealing with Sakura, who had hoisted this assault upon them without an appointment. Currently, the impression he had of Sakura was that of a terribly elusive woman. But, Emilia, Sakura-san, are you a good friend of Phylor's? I just became friends with her. Sakura, yes, I've heard that so much from Phylor-chan that I'm sick of it. She just keeps going around saying, my Emilia this, my Emilia that. Well, I'm a peer of Phylor-chan's at the church, so I suppose I'm something like a stand-in big sister to hear. Emilia, Phylor's big sister. Subaru. Of course, there's quite the difference in that lovely liveliness between you sisters. Sakura. I'm merely a stand-in for a big sister, you know. That girl grew up as a most cherished child of the church, kept carefully hidden away, so perhaps you could say she is like the younger sister of everyone in the church. Looking pleased, Sakura said so, the warmth of her smile remaining constant. Hence, it was an enigma as to how much of her explanation concerning Phylor they should earnestly believe. However, the description of Phylor being raised as a cherished child of the church that was hidden away weighed on him. Otto. Well then, is it correct to believe the reason that Phylor-san never appeared in public was due to the policy of the Church of the Divine Dragon? Sakura. That is correct. Well, that also became pointless as a result of Phylor-chan rushing out on her own with a bang. Subaru. So Phylor's rampage was truly beyond the church's expectations. Without knowing the individual in question, it was a story that would be tremendously difficult to believe. But to Subaru, who had actually spoken with Phylor, it was an outcome completely lacking in incongruity. Yesterday as well, she had been forcibly put in detention at the church, but at that rate, it felt like she would soon reach the limits of her patience and rush out on her own. Sakura, I mean, she actually did rush out, which is why I visited the lodging of Emilia-chan and the rest of you Tatoe. Subaru, rushing out you're talking about today? Sakura, yes, it was this morning. Even though I advised her yesterday about the tasks we had to complete today. She's really such a troublemaker. Subaru, wait. Is it really fine to just treat her as a little Miss Troublemaker and then go about drinking tea? Though it had not been broadly announced, there could be no doubt that Phylor had quickly climbed the ladder into becoming an important figure for the kingdom. How was it that the one appointed to be her overseer could relax here so leisurely while such a girl was acting on her own? Sakura, laughing with an to Subaru and the others, flustered as they were, as if it were someone else's problem. Sakura, please rest assured when it comes to that. Believe it or not, I know where Phylor-chan is headed. To be precise, it's where her friend Emilia-chan is. Emilia, Ah, is that what it is? She's coming to where I am, she hasn't come though. Subaru, she didn't come yet, did she? She had seemed to think that it would be grounds for relief, but instead, that information had failed to serve that role, and they had resumed their panic. From Sakura's confident-sounding wording, it would seem she had something like a note from Phylor that indicated her destination. But no one in the camp had caught sight of the girl in question. Naturally, neither Petra nor Otto knew of her whereabouts either. Subaru. Biko obviously doesn't know either. She's been with me all day today since I woke up. Beatrice? In fact, Betty went to bed and got up early together with Subaru, brushed her teeth together with Subaru, and had breakfast together with Subaru after doing radio calisthenics together with Subaru, I suppose. During all of that, she didn't see that noisy girl at all, in fact. Emilia, WH, what should we do? What if something were to happen to Phylor? Coming face to face with this, Subaru and the others were incredibly worried over the whereabouts of the missing Phylor. When she had suddenly appeared, they were surprised by her existence. But now that she had abruptly vanished, she had caused an entirely different shock. It was as if Phylor was a tempest in human form. And next to the flustered Subaru and Emilia, Otto let out a soft sigh. Subaru, hey, what's that about, Otto? Ah, no way were you thinking that since it's the source of our worries, you would rather she just vanished so it would cause less problems in the future. Beatrice. Otto, that's seriously a bit too much like Roswell, I suppose. Otto. Please stop causing damage to my reputation. You too, Beatrice-chan. Do not look at me with those eyes. Just to confirm, is Phylor-san wearing the habit of the Church of the Divine Dragon? His veins bulging in response to the knowing glance Subaru and Beatrice shared, Otto then verified Phylor's attire with Sakura. Upon Sakura's response to that question of course, and a nod, Otto, then I would not worry about it. Unless something extraordinary were to occur, a woman dressed as a nun of the Church of the Divine Dragon should not get wrapped up in any trouble on the street. Emilia. Really? Petra-chan, is that true? Petra. Indeed, I believe it's as Otto-san says. If someone from the church were to get in trouble, I believe someone around them would certainly offer to help. Upon hearing Otto and Petra's conviction on the matter, as if it was only natural, Subaru and Emilia could only say, is that so? As if seeing a new perspective. To Subaru. But that's only if she gets in trouble on the street, right? If there's a development like falling into the wicked, evil clutches of some malicious individual, even that wouldn't be foolproof, right? Otto, what are you talking about? A person riddled with wickedness, evil, malice, based on that attitude of Sakura-san's, it seems such worries are unnecessary. The reason she is here in the first place is… Sakura. Otto-chan, you're quite quick-witted, aren't you? Exactly, I am here in anticipation. Right as Otto was convinced of the conclusion he had attempted to state, Sakura snatched it away from him and spoke of the reason for her visit to the royal residence herself. The way she had put it was subtly lacking in its explanation, but its substance, together with the recklessness of the real Phylor, provided Subaru in particular with an answer, a step behind Otto. Subaru, in other words, Phylor left to go to where Emilia-tan is, but because she doesn't know the exact location, she'll have to gather information here and there while on her way. Beatrice. Stand in for a big sister, you anticipated the eventual arrival of Phylor here, which is why you are drinking tea with Betty and everyone else, in fact. Sakura. Clap, 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 you're spot on. The children here at Emilia-chan's place are awfully brilliant. Sakura praised her with gentle applause, but Subaru and the others were not so naive as to take her compliments at face value. Besides, even combining the kindness of the Church of the Divine Dragon towards humanity with the initiative of Phylor, he could not be certain as to whether this woman was definitively safe. He wondered if Emilia had the same concerns, and as she furrowed her shapely eyebrows, Emilia, Sakura-san, you're so confident, but I'm worried about Phylor. I'll just go take a little look around here, Rem. Emilia-san, if I may. A guest has arrived. Those worries of Emilia's were perfectly interrupted by the sound of Rem knocking on the door of the parlor. Everyone's gaze instinctively swiveled toward the door, and repeating, a guest. Emilia tilted her head. Immediately after, the door was blown open from the other side with such force and a bam, stranger. It's terrible, Emilia. Please save your friend. Emilia, Philor. Before Emilia's eyes widened in astonishment, the one who rushed into the parlor in a tizzy was none other than Philor, the very one who had been the topic of conversation. Those crimson eyes of hers wet with tears, she dashed over to Emilia, who was staring at her, and dove headfirst into her chest without slowing her momentum at all. The force of it had been nearly that of a headbutt, but Emilia easily withstood that attack of Philor's and caught her. Emilia, wah, you surprised me. Are you okay, Philor? Are you hurt? Philor, yeah, I'm okay. No, I'm not. I'm falling apart. Look, it's not my body, but my mind that's falling apart. Emilia, oh no, that's terrible. Where should I look? Philor, I don't know either, so just squeeze me. Emilia, okay, squeeze. Immediately upon her entrance, Philor dyed the space in her own hue with tremendous momentum. Emilia's manliness shone as she went with the flow, responding without hesitation. As he watched the two of them embrace like that, Petra came up next to him, and lightly pulling on the sleeve of Subaru's tracksuit, Petra, is that the rumored Saintess Sama? Subaru, that is the rumored Saintess Sama indeed. What do you think? How different is she from the image you had? Petra, perhaps it's quite a bit different. But I think that's fine. What constitutes a saintess likely varies from person to person. Subaru, an age of diversity even when it comes to saintesses. Can't say that really speaks to me. Even though Petra was both a good listener and a good speaker, she struggled to put into words how overwhelmed she was. In any case, the worst-case scenario of Philor roaming alone throughout the royal capital, never to arrive at the royal residence, had been averted for now. Subaru, and then there is the objective of Philor, who's going so far as to ask us for help. But, Beatrice, for the time being, it doesn't give off a good feeling, I suppose. Subaru completely agreed with Beatrice's anticipation. Ignoring them, Emilia spoke in a hushed voice to Philor, who was calming down little by little within her arms, and while soothing her, Emilia, so can you tell me what happened? What do you mean by save you? Philor, that the thing is, things have become quite disastrous, Emilia. Emilia, disastrous, gulp. At that pompous wording of Philor's, Emilia swallowed with a loud gulping noise. Looking at Emilia from up close, Philor continued. It was, Philor. It seems I must participate as a candidate in the royal selection. Her voice quavering tearfully, Philor lamented that undue fate that had befallen her. Hearing this, Emilia's amethyst eyes widened. Otto put his hand to his forehead. Petra bit a lip upon her cute face, and Subaru and Beatrice looked at each other, and then Subaru. As expected. Beatrice. That bad feeling was proven right, in fact. Philor, what in the world am I ever to do, Sakura? At the same time, the unpleasant foresight of Subaru and Beatrice came true. Sakura, whose presence had been unnoticed by Philor due to having her back to the parlor's entrance, waved at her. Upon this unexpected encounter with her family, Philor, the one who had brought such an uproar with her, opened her mouth so very, very wide that it seemed like her jaw would fall off. The beautiful girl had been reduced to naught.